Hi, everyone, and welcome to this very special bonus episode of the Friday Nightmare podcast. I am the one and only part of your hosting team tonight, Heather Powell, coming to you today from Waterdown, Ontario, Canada. And the reason why it's just me is it came down to scheduling, and we had a very, very important special guest, and I wanted to make sure that we got this interview out in time for a very, very special event that he has coming up. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my good friend, Mark Iveson. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Heather. It's lovely to be on your show, and I'm all yours.
Well, Mark,
What
and
can I
we
do for you?
should be honest. So, full
Yes,
disclosure, Mark and I are actually very good friends. I
very
just
good
came
friends.
back
Yes.
from seeing Mark in the UK, and we had a lovely time together. Mark is a international author, which is why we have him on the show today.
Yes.
And he will be going over some. We'll be asking him some questions, but I just want to make it clear that Mark and I do know each other. So, if there's a little bit of friendliness between the two of us, it's because we're not strangers. Though we did meet
Mhm.
almost a year ago around this time, due to Barry Kowalski's Stock and Talk channel that was on YouTube, and we did a quiz on there. And Mark, you did actually very well on that quiz. I remember
Yes.
the
I
first
can't
time
remember myself. I did do quite well. Yeah.
you did. It was on older horror movies.
Mhm.
And as listeners will learn today, that happens to be your area of expertise.
Yes, that's
So,
correct.
right, I think I came in dead last with maybe 5 points, maybe in total. So, but I did learn a lot that episode, and we're all going to learn a lot from you today. So, we'll jump
Mhm.
right into the interview. So just to give a clarification here, Mark is the author of two books. Mark, do you mind just saying the two books that you've currently
Of
released?
course not. I'm here to promote. My first book is called Cursed Horror Stars, and my second book is called Vincent Price: The British Connection.
Awesome.
Both available through Telos Publishing. I might as well add it.
Yes, yes. And we'll do more promos for them at the end, but I've shared on our page that you can order them through Amazon.ca and Amazon.com. I own both copies of Mark's books, and both are phenomenal. So now that we've given a little bit of setting the stage, we'll get into some questions about Mark. So tell me, Mark, what started your love for horror?
I don't know. I've always loved movies of all kinds. Obviously, as a kid, watching kids' movies. I'm not sure. I think horror. I became a big fan of Peter Cushing when I
Hmm.
first saw him in Doctor Who and the Daleks, and after that, I got to see him in a number of very good horror films as a kid. And of course, this is the days when we only had three channels. This is what we had in England, when we had BBC One, BBC Two, and the independent stations. Channel 4 and Channel 5 came, and then now we've got 500 million TV stations. And what they did on BBC Two on a Saturday evening was the horror double bill. And I would try and stay up late to watch. It would begin with a black and white Universal movie with Boris Karloff,
Very
and then it
nice.
would be a color hammer horror with Peter Cushing and or Christopher Lee. So that's where it came from. I was just became hooked on the horror genre. But I also like science fiction. I'm a big fan of the James Bond movies, and I love comedy, British comedy especially, and so it's just basically I just love the movies, and I kind of grew up watching the movies, and eventually started writing about
Yeah, and that's when we're going to go into my second question. But it's always good that you provide such an overview of where your
them.
love from horror came from. And for everyone, it usually has to do with being a kid, and a lot of people from watching horror movies on television. Actually, it tends to be a really big popular thing that people done.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
how long have you been writing for, and what have you written about?
Okay, this is interesting because one of the few things I was actually good at, I was good at art and I was good at English language, and I used to write horror stories. I wrote other stories as well, and that's where I got it from. But I came from the era where the slasher films were popular, so I was still influenced by the old spooky castles, the vampires, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas most kids my age would rather go and see Friday the 13th or Halloween. The shows,
Mm.
I'm showing my age here, and so I did that, but I also wrote nonfiction. When it comes to actually, I mean, I didn't have any plans to be a writer when I left school. I mean, obviously, I needed to go out, earn a living, find a job, and so on, which I eventually did. But way it came about was I used to go to the cinema quite a lot, and somebody at an office I worked in, they had a regular periodical, like a magazine they sent out. And he asked me to write film reviews. So I started writing film reviews, and it developed into other articles. So my humble beginnings was a works writing magazine. Naturally, I went on to other magazines after that. That's been yes, I started writing, I would say, in my early 20s.
That's awesome.
Probably,
Can you give us
yeah.
some examples of the magazines you've written for? Because I know what you've written
Oh,
for, and you've done some pretty cool stuff, Mark. You really
I know
have.
some cool stuff. I mean, I won't bother the works magazines, they're just works magazines. And if I look back on now, probably what I'd written was dreadful. When it came to moving on to other away from works magazines, I was writing for. I wrote for a magazine called Up Front, which was a local arts magazine. I live in Gateshead, northeast of England, and I used to write theatre reviews for that. I also wrote for a vampire magazine called Bite Me, which was based in Glasgow. And just to show that it wasn't all about movies and horror and so on, I actually wrote a couple of pieces for the Geneva Times, even though I'd never been to Switzerland before. Yes, I knew the assistant editor, and I showed her a couple of pieces I would like to write for. Just basically, it's just for the English language community in Switzerland. And on top of that, but the main thing which got me writing, because I'd already had my book, I already had the ideas for a book, and I was advised to just maybe try to write for more magazines. I ended up writing for a web mag, which is sadly now defunct, called Shadowlocked.
Oh, okay.
Wrote about 30 odd articles in one form or another.
Wow.
Yeah, one of the perks of writing for them, if you want to write about a particular movie, you get a free copy.
Look at you, huh?
So yes, ended up someone put up the Hobbit film, the first Hobbit film, and they had the special edition. Who wants to go for it? I went straight in there and managed to get a special edition, which basically lasted about 3 CDs.
That is amazing.
So it was great, and and that's what I did. And also I managed to get free books as well for some of the certain books I was writing, and I was really quite prolific. I wrote over 30 odd articles to quite a good response as well, and that helped me take the next step. Really.
So you've been writing on and off for, would you say, almost 30 years?
You could say that, yes. Yes.
Because it's crazy that you're 31 and you started so young.
Yes, I know.
Writing.
Yes, I was just about to learn how to write.
That's right. Absolutely. And I've had the pleasure of actually seeing one of your most recent magazine articles that you submitted in a beautiful spread in a magazine. And it was a review on, which movie was it again?
Oh, gosh.
Or it was a psychological analyzation.
It was a psychological analyzation. It was for We Belong Dead, which I will come to them at a later date. It was to do with their 30th anniversary of their magazine, that they produced a book. And I wrote a piece on Theatre of Blood. But rather than, it's such a popular movie, I decided to, rather than write about the film, I decided to do a sort of psychological analysis of the lead character, Edward Lionheart, which was played brilliantly by Vincent Price, to analyse the fact, was he, if you've seen the movie, and I know most people have, was he as bad a Shakespearean actor as the critics made him out to be? And it was interesting. I don't think he was, although I will say, if you read the piece, he was certainly limited. What he could do.
Yeah.
It's a good piece. And I've written for several We Belong Dead books over the past couple of years, especially during the COVID era.
Yeah, COVID probably gave you lots of inspiration and time to do some writing.
Yes, and also the fact that someone says, here's a number of films, who wants to write what? And I just went and picked 2 or 3 of them, and that was it.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'm going to cough, so I'm going to try to get through this question without coughing. What inspired you to write your first book, Cursed Horror Stars?
Cursed Horror Stars. Now, initially, when I had the idea to write a book, I had an idea of what you would call a Halliwell's film goer's companion, which was like an A to Z of everybody associated with the horror genre. Now, to be honest, that kind of book would have been too unwieldy and too expensive and too heavy going to get published. And sadly, when it comes to reference books, I'm afraid you've got the Internet Movie Database has basically destroyed the reference book, which is a shame, but that's technology for you. So I found myself in a bit of a loose end because I wanted to write a book, and now I thought, what am I going to do next? And the way Cursed Horror Stars originated was, I won't give too much away, but it was the death of one of the actors who features in the book. He died, let's say, recently compared to the others, in circumstances that were a little bit ill-befitting who I thought was a great actor. And then that's why I decided to do look on the downside of the genre, were they cursed or not. And that's where Cursed Horror Stars originated from. So there you go.
That's awesome. And I've read the book. So, and Mark knows, because Mark and I have chatted a lot. We're very close. Yeah. And I think I felt very privileged, Mark, because I've told you this before, that being friends with you, I was able to read a chapter and then talk to you about it. And I think that's very special. And one of the things that I was shocked that you taught me about was the change of silent films to talkie films.
Oh, God,
And
yes.
how that affected the history of cinema. So not only would people get to know about some of the famous horror stars that we really do have to thank for the genre being what it is today, you also educate on cinematic history as well in your book.
Yes, I mean, I'll be honest. I do like. It's only a recent thing that I really got like silent movies, and I'll just add to that when I started doing talks, it's a place in Newcastle called the Castle Keep. It's an old ruin which is open to the public, and they used to screen cinema films. You know, not just silent ones, but others as well. And what they did was, when they did the silent movies, they did it to live music, which adds an extra dimension to it. And I found the silent, especially silent horror films, absolutely fascinating. I like silent comedy as well, especially Harold Lloyd was one of the silent comedians that grew up. And I found that's how I warm to silent movies. But they are incredible because you're talking about in the silent era, one of the most very influential periods was expressionist cinema in Germany, German expressionist cinema, where they produced the likes of Nosferatu and the Peter Lorre classic M, which was a talking picture, and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And I just found these films were absolutely fascinating to watch. Metropolis, another great example of a wonderful German film. So yeah. And also, when you look at transferring from silent to sound, it was very much it was very much a strange Renaissance period because at the time Hollywood, like every country, was experiencing a serious depression, and the advent of the talkies suddenly, it was a way of getting people to the cinemas to watch their films. But also on the downside, a lot of actors found themselves at a career crossroads because sometimes their voices didn't quite match how they looked. And a lot of careers sadly dwindled or even ended completely because simply their voices just did not suit what the public wanted. So it's Hollywood's an awful place when you think about it. And it's such a downside to amongst the bright, glitzy glamour and so on. It was really sort of a very sleazy place to be. So it is. It's a lot. There's a lot to take in the transference of sound pictures to talking pictures.
Your book really does, and I've told you this many a times, but your book really does provide a really good education to the modern day horror fan like myself. And Mark does know that I'm not someone who's watched a lot of older films. I watch more modern films, and those modern films wouldn't exist if it wasn't for these stars, if it wasn't for the people who made these films. And I found that when I read this book, you did speak about all of the individuals you wrote about with a high level of respect. Even personal struggles they experienced, you still spoke about it in a way that was respectful and accurate. And I want to ask you, because there are several of the stars that you wrote about, who is your favorite cursed horror star from the book and why?
They're all good actors. I think my all-time favourite will be Basil Rathbone, simply because he was the great Sherlock Holmes. And I think for him, he was just one of the most versatile actors of his day. However, I would say the one that he's my favourite, but the one that fascinated me the most was the last one in the book was Robert Quarry. And very little had been written about him. There's been interviews and so on. I think now he's been rediscovered quite a bit. He was originally Count Yorga Vampire, but at the time there was very, very little to go about him because his career kind of faded before it really took off. And I was really fascinated by the guy, and I still remain fascinated. I would still like to learn more about this amazing man who deserved a much bigger career than he actually got. So yes, it's a combination between Robert Quarry's my most fascinating of the actors, and Basil Rathbone remains the best in my opinion because I grew up with his movies with Sherlock Holmes and so on.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it really does reflect in your book when you get to Robert Quarry. It's at the end, and for someone that didn't have a lot written about him, you really managed to do your research and talk about a lot of really relevant information. It's a very good read. So I've talked about what I learned, and I'm very honest as my lack of older film knowledge goes and learning about the talkies and stuff like that. But what do you think a horror fan can expect to learn from this book specifically?
Okay, well, obviously the main thing, learn about these people. They're all very new. So for a beginner, that's perfect. I would like to say, when I look at these, if a person reads it, I just like to think it was a different tack to what we normally get. It's a lot of straightforward biographies and a lot of books written about them. I would say I would like to think that I want to show maybe the human side of who they are, which I think that's what most
Mm.
biographies try to do, and let's say people learn from it. So yeah, I would like to say that I like a person to read it to really think that to be really would find something really interesting in the person. I would say, and yeah, I think that book provides that. I think that book provides something a little bit more unique from the norm, and I would like to think that. People would get it, that people would understand what I'm trying to write. I think when you ask, yes, I write with a great deal of respect. I like to think I also wrote with a great deal of warmth and a great deal of
Mm-hmm.
humor as well. Obviously,
Yes, very much so.
keeping the humor in its context. Because obviously, when you think about it, cursed horror stars, rise and fall of people. It sounds rather depressing.
Yeah.
Like a
Yes.
depressing read.
Yes.
I hope it's not a depressing. I think that people would be really enthralled by it.
Well, it is not depressing. You know what I think of your book. I think it's absolutely incredible. And I would agree. You write with the appropriate amount of humor.
Yeah.
And, I think if people can pretend that they hear it in your English accent, they're going to even want to read it even more. So
Oh,
I
without
want
a
you to
doubt.
envision Mark talking while you're reading everybody.
Please, I'm putting a little bit more clip in the English language. Believe you me.
It's
Only
going to
sound
sound
like
even
this.
smarter,
Yes,
right? Because it's
that makes me
British.
sound smart. Yes.
All the North Americans are like, oh, wow, it's British. I got to definitely read this in Mark's British accent. But it is a beautifully written book. It's educational, fun, enlightening. And also it brings a very honest side to Hollywood that I think a lot of people don't think about. And I think you discuss it in a way that's very palatable. And it's an easy read. So,
yeah.
But we'll move on
You
because
want a book to be an easy read. You don't want to
exactly.
you don't want to try end up wading through it. And I'm not saying that all books are like that. It depends on the reader as well. I certainly couldn't go through War and Peace. Not saying it's obviously a classic novel, but I just don't think I could ever go
Yeah.
through that.
Yeah. And you are an avid reader. You read a lot. Like you had to read a lot for both books. You had to do your research. So,
yes.
You definitely, and I've had the pleasure of, as I said, Mark and I have got together in person. So I've seen the books. He reads a lot. This man is full of knowledge. So that is his first book. But then Mark got back in the ring and took another swing and came back coming with his second book. So on to your second book, Mark.
Whoa.
You're like, now this is where we get to Vinny. What inspired you to write about Vincent Price? And then, of course, why the British connection?
Right. Well, interesting. It was the death of Vincent Price back in October 1993.
When you were 5.
When I was 5, yes. I was on vacation in America, St. Thomas, Ohio.
Very well traveled 5-year-old.
A very well traveled 5-year-old with my pen pal, who's the same age, and they announced on TV the death of Vincent Price. He was after Peter Cushing, one of my favorite actors, and people know him on TV. So he actually inspired me to want to write in the first place. So that's the first part. The second part with Vincent Price, The British Connection, as the title of the book is. It actually came from a piece I wrote for Shadowlocked, and all it was basically a review of all the British movies he made in the later half of his career. And then once that finished, and it had a decent response as well, I thought, I think I can expand that into book form. And obviously a different tack, because there's been loads of books written about the great actor. His daughter Victoria, who I've had the good fortune to meet, and is an absolutely lovely lady, very much a daddy's girl. She's an adorable woman. I saw she gave a talk on her father. She's written a biography about him. I just thought, well, the British side of it, maybe a different tack completely. Yeah, just not just focus on his British films, but also his British links. He has strong British links, and I think you and I'm sure you'll agree, when you first hear it, he's easily, because of his wonderful speaking voice, it's very easy to guess that he could be British. He has
absolutely.
He has perfect diction. That's from the time he was he played in classical theatre and so on. So hence he could play an Englishman very well, and so that made him suited to British made movies when he finally got round to that. But of course, he had lots of other strong links with the country.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, I have read some of this book. I am a little under a halfway through. And what I know, I haven't told Mark. I've been, I got to keep some things on the down low. So he's shocked during the interview. But what I really appreciate about this book, Mark, and I'll be honest, when I first looked at it, I'm like, British Connection. And you had told me a little bit about it. I'm like, okay, but you do a great job of setting the stage within the first couple of chapters. I think what I really appreciated is the detail you go into about not just Vincent Price's like being born, but his family background and his love for Britain and how he ended up in Britain and how it impacted him and just how it continues to live with him for his career. Like you opened up a side of Vincent Price for all the horror fans out here who are listening right now who tell me how much they love Vincent Price. You're about to learn some stuff that you never knew about. Which is really incredible. I think it's great that you chose to focus on that.
Good. And
Yeah,
like I said, I hope it's again, as with the previous book, written with a certain amount of warmth and humour.
of course.
That's it was never the intention of writing that like that. You might want to get the facts out. Naturally, I'll put it in a different, offering a different tact and knowing what a great man he is. It's certainly not. It's not a scandalous book. I hasten to add.
No,
There's nothing
no.
nothing scandalous there. I would say it. Yes, it offers something just. I would say unique to normally the
Yeah.
other biographies that have been written about him.
It is unique. And I think if you're truly a Vincent Price fan, Scott Crawford, who's the co-host of this podcast, claims to be, I think this is a book that needs to be purchased because I think if you're going to claim that, this is a book that you need to add to your collection in order to really expand. So building on that, what is your favorite chapter or part of the book and why?
Good gosh, now that's a hard one. I really don't want to give too much away about the books because naturally I would like people to buy and read it for itself. But since there's chapters, the first part of the book is about his life.
Yeah.
And in the second half of the book, I'm reviewing each of the films that he's done. If I've got a favorite one, it's very difficult because there's I've written some wonderful stuff. I would say if I had a particular favorite chapter, I'd written about the film Scream and Scream Again, because it was a really, really strange film. And I'm not giving away any spoilers about it because it's a strange horror sci-fi movie that he made in 1969. Naturally, I think one of the things that when you do write a book and a publisher goes through it, and there's obviously a lot of things get edited out, which sometimes it can be heartbreaking, especially if what they edited out makes good writing, I have to say. And it happened with that chapter and a couple of other chapters. However, looking at it from a fresh pair of eyes, I can understand why. So with Scream and Scream Again, I would say it was just because it was such a weird movie, it made it interesting writing. But I will also add Witchfinder General was a particular favourite chapter because it is one of the most talked about British films ever made, and that alone. And again, I wrote a bit of an experience of attending an event there as a guest, but that was removed. Which never mind, so I don't mind. Maybe it got too personal, but I would say Scream and Scream Again was a very interesting chapter to write about.
That's awesome. Yeah, you put so much information and love and humor and fun into your writing, Mark. And I've had the pleasure of reading several things that you've written. And I tell you this all the time off air. So that's all that's happening is I'm telling you it on air. But I guess, I've talked about what I've learned from your books. I've learned a lot, and I consider myself a pretty avid horror fan. I host this great podcast that everyone's listening to right now. But I want to ask you, what do you think a horror fan can learn specifically from the Vincent Price British Connection book?
I would say, a couple of things. Firstly, someone who wants to be introduced to Vincent Price. I think that's a perfectly good way. I could say any book would be a perfect one, but I'm going to say it's my book. I think it's a great way to introduce someone to the life and career and the very soul of this man, and I think that captures it nicely. For say something that's a little bit more established, I would, again, I suppose you couldn't give too much away. A big fan will know a lot about him. I just wanted to offer a different side to him by focusing on his British-made films and his relationship with many of the actors he'd worked with during those films and directors and so on. So I would say that would be my goal, just to offer a different slant to Vinny's career.
Awesome. Yeah. So I know that you have done so many speaking engagements. You actually just recently, you've done a fair amount. Let's not be too modest. You've recently completed a moderation session, and then you were actually a speaker at a book festival or a literacy festival, the Morphid. Is it Morphid?
It's the Morpeth Book Festival. For those who are not familiar, Morpeth is a market town that's in Northumberland, and this was like a year in the making because obviously things with COVID had put a stop to a lot of really big events. And it was the first Morpeth Book Festival, and I was friends with the organisers in any case, and they asked me to take part in it, and I was happy to do so. It was really what they wanted to do was try and start a new literary festival, which will hopefully be going as an ongoing concern. And they asked me as a local writer, would you like to take part? And I said, of course I would. And then he asked me, would you like to moderate for a particular event? Which I said, yes, of course I would. I never say no. And of course, one of the big stars of it, I don't know how popular she is in Canada. It was Anne Cleves, who was a crime writer. There's a television series called Vera, which is very, very popular in the UK. I don't know how if it's even heard of in Canada. And she was like the main selling point. Of course, tickets were sold for her. But I took part as a moderator for 4 writers who specialize in memoirs. And then my own involvement as a guest speaker. And of course, I was a moderator there as well. I was introducing the 2 writers who which is about dystopian fiction. Although I don't see mine as being dystopian, but I talked about it anyway. And it all took place in a wonderful, wonderful venue, and it turned out to be a really, really enjoyable couple of days. And hopefully it'll be on next year. And if they ask me, I'll do it again.
Well, and that's the thing, Mark. You are a salesperson. Not only do you promote yourself as a writer, but you promote others, and you promote literacy, which is so important. So I know that you have tables, and I know that you have books, and I know that you have many events. So if someone walks up to you at one of your tables and says, why should I read either of these books? So being either the Cursed Horror Stars or the Vincent Price book, what do you say?
Well, all I'm going to say is the fact that they sound interested in the first place. I think probably the best thing is if they want to read it, I say go buy it and find out yourself. If you're a genuine movie fan, or a genuine horror fan, or if you're genuinely interested in Vincent Price, well, I don't see why not buy it and read it, and hopefully you enjoy it.
Absolutely.
If you do buy it and not read it, well, I really don't mind because I've made money out of it.
To give it to somebody else that will read it then, because honestly, you're at a loss if you don't read these books if you're a horror fan. And this is yet again for all the listeners on Friday Nightmares, you know that I am not a Universal monster movie fan. You know that my history of films really declines after 1970. We go back from that and I get real dodgy on stuff that I've seen, and I learned a lot, and it really pushed me out of my comfort zone. And when I went to visit Mark, we did watch Tales of Terror together.
We did,
and I felt like I was a little bit step closer to having a smidgen of the knowledge that Mark does.
Well, you've got the smidgen of the knowledge of both books, because Tales of Terror, it's a horror anthology, 3 tale.
That's right.
Tales. Vincent Price appears in all three stories.
He does.
And actually, that's the Vincent Price book. Vinny, actually, if I look at the book, he's mentioned quite prominently in Cursed Horror Stars because he's worked with the actors. Yep. The other 2 actors, Basil Rathbone and Peter Lorre, were in Tales of Terror. Well, they're also in the book too, in the first book. And they're mentioned in the second book. I think it kind of cross over, don't they?
It's a great crossover.
Like
it's perfect. Absolutely. You planned that. You were so good, Mark, that you planned that for sure, right?
I suppose I did, yes. Maybe subconsciously.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for answering those questions. But there's a really special reason why we're doing this interview today and why we're releasing it. You have a big event coming up. Would you like to tell us more about it?
Indeed, I do. And it takes place, and it's for those who live locally, or if you're passing through, or if you can get a last-minute flight over from whichever country you're living in to visit Newcastle upon Tyne. On June the 9th, there is an event called Meet the Author, Meet the Artist. It's an AA meeting with a difference. If you look at it that way.
It's a better AA meeting. It's the best kind.
A better AA meeting, yes, because there will be a wine reception. So what kind of AA meeting is that? And it's Meet the Author, Meet the Artist. Myself, it's a kind of belated book launch. I planned to do a book launch, but COVID kind of put pay to that. And in association with a friend of mine called Lucy Dawlish, who is an artist, she's painted some incredible works, we decided to have a combined event. So as well as we'll both be on stage talking about ourselves, as we usually do, and we'll also be sort of talking about our love for the books, our love for our art, and hopefully we're trying to get as many people involved as possible. The tickets are through Eventbrite, I'm familiar with that, and they are actually free. So you're not really buying a ticket, you're just booking one. And it takes place at 5 p.m. at Newcastle Library, 5 till 7, and already we've sold about 30 tickets, so it's going really well. So it's basically just myself talking about my writing career, and Lucy talking about her artistic career. Interesting enough, we both play bass guitar. Lucy herself, with her husband, also called Mark, nice guy. They play as a duet.
Well, he has a good name, right?
That's how I first met
why.
her. Yeah, that's where I first met her. She was doing a gig. And all I can say is that it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to get people can make it. It's going to be absolutely wonderful. And interesting enough, I'll tell you the story, because obviously I've been laying out flyers and promoting the whole event. That one day there's a wine place in what we call the French Quarter of Newcastle. Called Cava Beans. I know I'm not blatantly advertising them, and they very kindly designed.
But it's a very beautiful. Mark took me there. It's really nice. Yeah. If you're in Newcastle, you should go to this place.
If you love your wines, the two fellows that run it, very nice guys, and they actually promoted it. They designed their own poster to put on display for a wine tasting event that I've been to a couple of. And I said to Lucy, "Are you free on Friday? Did you fancy doing some wine tasting?" And she was very kindly said yes. So it was at least so the two of us were there, able to talk about our event and so on, and hopefully we're connecting with people that would be interested in buying it. But the main part was we tried lots of wine,
which is the best part, right?
It is the best
part.
You win, and it's a really, really lovely place to. It's a lovely place to go. So it's going to be what Lucy said she'll do, and I don't want to say too much, but she had planned whether. I don't know if she'll go for it or not. She wanted to paint a portrait of Vincent Price to auction off. I don't know if she's got around to it yet, so it's all hit and miss, but I hope she has. But what she's going to do is auction it off. But we're really, at the moment, we're going to talk about what we do as both as an author and as an artist. And I hope that people will be very enthusiastic about what we're doing. And hopefully it'll lead on to some more events.
Absolutely. And just so you know, Mark, I would bid on a portrait of you painted. I would bid tons of money.
Great.
Pounds,
I'll have to ask.
Not Canadian, not Canadian dollars, in real money. Pounds. Real money. So that's so exciting, Mark. I know your event will go amazingly. So for any of our listeners that are in the UK area or Ireland or Scotland, or perhaps you're making a trip over to Europe right now, there's a huge push in Canada and the United States to travel to Europe. Check out this event and meet Mark. Mark is a fabulous individual. He's so interesting. He's so kind, and he's English. Like, let's be real. Like, he's way more exciting than us. So, there's that.
I don't know about that. Is that my attempt at the Canadian accent?
Yes. That was a great Canadian accent. And Lucy as well, who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, but I know through you, she sounds absolutely lovely, creative, and it sounds like it'll be a fun night.
She's a fun lady. She's very beautiful, very talented, and really just she's like the chat. We always have a jolly good laugh about stuff when we do get together. So so love it a bit. She's a great girl, and I'm looking forward to us finally doing this big event. So we're going to see who has the nervous breakdown first.
Definitely won't be you, Mark. It definitely won't be you.
One of the things I wanted to add to that with doing, because I have done several talks, because when my first book came out, I was deciding, should I sit back and just let the money come in? And I thought, no. What I have to do, what I feel I should do, and although I'm restricted because I have a job and so on, so I couldn't very well go up and ride up and down the motorways giving talks. I was restricted to doing local stuff. And I decided I was going to put myself out to do talks, and eventually I ended up, the Castle Keep sorted out several talks for me, which was wonderful. But as it progressed on, it led on to, and especially in 2016, which was a wonderful year for me in terms of promoting the first book, I got involved in the Whitley Bay Film Festival, which is a massive festival. It's been going on for a long, long time. Sadly, COVID, amongst other things, ended it, and it's not on this year. I don't know what they're planning. And also, later through the people I met there, I got involved in the Newcastle Book Festival, where I did a talk. And again, it was just a wonderful experience doing this doing it at this wonderful, very modern library. And of course, I've done smaller talks as well. And I think it's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun doing it. It's a lot of fun connecting with people, and it's just something I enjoy doing. And I just wish I could. Unfortunately, I've not been able to do it as much as I would like, but hopefully this will lead on to something else. Please.
And I can tell everyone yet again, when I went to visit Mark, I did see the Castle Keep, and I saw the room that he did the talk, and then I got him to do a portion of the talk for me. And
Oh,
he
what I
is
could
such a
remember of
great
it.
speaker. Oh, you did pretty good on the spot. You did pretty
Uh-huh.
amazing. And I think that's the thing about Mark. Not only, Mark, are you engaging as a speaker and you're also engaging as a writer.
Mhm.
And we will include in the show link several our show link notes several
Yes.
things. We're going to include the link for the Eventbrite events, so in case
Mhm.
anybody is interested.
Oh,
And
good
yet
stuff.
again, that is on Thursday, June 9th at 5 p.m. at the Newcastle Library in Newcastle upon Tyne,
Yes, got
and
that right.
in England,
In England, yes.
and yes, and also the links for Amazon.com for all my
Yes.
or sorry .ca for all my Canadian friends,
Uh,
and .com for all my American friends for both books. In case people would
don't
like to
forget that
order, we
you've
want
got a
to
link.
make it very simple.
If you want to include the publishers as well, you can get the publishers
Yes,
directly, which is
yes, we will
Telos.
do that as well. And
Mhm.
that way, I guess you can order the publishers would ship to obviously United States and Canada. That should be fine,
They
right?
have done that, yes. I mean,
Okay,
it's
perfect.
great. I get wonderful people. One that stuck in my mind was a young boy from Texas who said he got my first book. I really
Aww,
enjoyed it. Don't know the guy.
awesome.
Actually, to be honest, I can't remember his name or anything. But it was just kind of nice that some people overseas has been buying the book, and it's been absolutely wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, we got to bring Mark here to Canada, guys. We got to get him in the America. Well, I guess Canada more. We got to get him over here so
Canada
he
would
can
be
come
great.
and
Yes,
tour,
Canada would be fab. But I mean,
right?
if there's a diversion to the States as well, I don't mind that either. Just depending where.
He'll accept that. He'll
Yeah.
accept that as part of the offer. So, thank you so much, Mark, for joining. Was there anything else you wanted to add or promote before we
Nothing
end
else
our interview
I
today?
could add. I just said that one of the loves is writing, and I just want to owe something as a writer. I've been going to a writing retreat. I've been going every year for about 14 years now, maybe even longer. And I went there as a novice, not knowing what to do. Come out as a novice, still not knowing what to do. However, I went back and I eventually started to. I think that has been a big help in not just in learning about the techniques of writing, but also the fact that the support was there. And I have had some, bad times in my life. I've been, I have battled. I'm not ashamed to admit that I've had clinical depression, which did stop me from writing for a while. Which I'm about to say I've kind of got over the worst of it. And I think a place like that has been a big help and a big influence in what I've done. So I've been very fortunate enough to meet a lot of writers of varying success stories, and for that, it's been an absolute pleasure.
That's
And to me,
awesome.
also doing talks is an absolute pleasure when you get people. It may not be many people, it could be hundreds of people, but if it's people that just are genuinely interested, it just makes the fact that I've done something worthwhile. And of course, when you write a book and it gets published, it is worthwhile. You've achieved something. And I like to add to a friend of mine once said to me, when my second book came out, he said, just to show I got a second book out, so I wasn't just a one-trick pony, just one book and that's it, never heard of again. He said to me that getting the first book out is an amazing experience and to be proud of and all that. But he said, but getting a second book out, he said that feels like real achievement. I'm inclined to agree with him there. It just feels like the second book I'm immense. I love the first book. The second book I'm immensely proud of, but it shows it's real achievement that I've gone and done that. And for that, well, that's what I was going to say. I'm very, very proud of what I've done, both with the books and what I've done book related. That makes it worthwhile.
Absolutely. And, Mark, it is a pleasure that I was able to get connected with you and share this journey with you and learn from you. Mark has been encouraging me to watch a British series movies called Carry On. And I would like any of the Friday Nightmare listeners to message me if they've watched this series, because I feel like other people have. And Mark is telling me I got to watch it from the beginning. So
it would help to introduce you to the actors. There is a classic, actually, one of the Carry On films, Carry On Screaming, is long regarded as one of the best horror comedies ever made.
See, look at you. See, this is what you can learn from buying Mark's books, everybody. You don't even want to listen to me by the end of the day. You're just going to want Mark to come on the show and talk about his knowledge that he has. Maybe we'll have to bring you on once in a while, Mark, and you can just share stuff.
Yes, I'm not doing much. I'm not doing much at the moment, so yes, you count.
Yeah, we get you before you get too famous, and then we have to pay a retainer to get you to come on.
Even when you become famous, you've got to pay a little bit homage to your roots.
Yes.
Every so often. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
absolutely,
no fear of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining.
Thank you.
And I encourage everybody, to at least buy Mark's book if you can. I'm telling you right now, it is money well spent. If you're a horror fan, it is really going to enlighten you on some of our famous horror stars that we have to thank for today's cinema. And also, if you're in the area, Thursday, June 9th, 5 p.m., Newcastle Library in Newcastle upon Tyne in England is where the event of the year will be. If you want to meet this handsome gentleman and the beautiful co-host Lucy, it will totally be worth it. So
wonderful.
Thank you, Mark. And just to sign us out, thank you for listening to Friday Nightmares as always. This has been a very special bonus episode with just me, but no fear, our episode that will be released either on the same day as this one or shortly after. Scotty and I are back in the saddle again. I have returned from my travels from UK and Ireland and ready to talk about some New Zealand horror. So that will be coming up next. So thank you for listening and good night, everyone.
Mm-hmm.